In the last lecture, we studied the graphical method of displacement analysis. And make note that the graphical method is applicable only to planar mechanisms, and that also it succeeds only in the case of dyadic mechanisms, which are also known as simple mechanisms. Okay, having a single degree of freedom is not not a necessity, and that is no bar. It has to be a dyadic mechanism. That is, at every stage, uh, the fresh assembly task for that particular stage has to be just the assembly of a new dyad. If you can decompose the problem to a sequence of such dyad assemblies, then you will be able to handle it. Now, today we study analytical methods of displacement analysis. Okay, so analytical methods are more general, precise, and scalable. That is, of course, even graphical methods are scalable in the sense that they can be applied to larger and larger problems also. But the analytical methods are scalable with better ease. And the second, more important point is that analytical methods are amenable to computer implementation. You can write a program on it. Okay, and even if it requires just sine, cosine, sine inverse, cosine inverse, and multiplication, division, addition, subtraction kind of things, even then, doing a sequence of 30, 35 of them by hand may be complicated and may um, give rise to more errors, okay, mistakes of hitting the calculator keys. On the other hand, if you write it in a program, then you can check it through from top to bottom, execute it. If there is any mistake, which you can debug and correct. And once it is through, then you can execute it whenever you want, okay, without any errors. So now this makes it suitable for repetitive application for different inputs and indeed even different kinematic data. Okay, so once you have written a program for the displacement analysis of 4R mechanisms, if it is well written, then for all 4R mechanisms of whatever dimensions, L1, L2, L3, L4, you keep on changing and you can get the analysis done in a matter of seconds. In fact, in a fraction of a second, you will get the result for this one. Okay, so and for a sequence of angular positions of the crank, you can get the output in hand. Okay, so what is the process? First of all, express link configurations and slider positions also as vectors. You can write the vectors as the simple straightforward geometric vectors with ij components, or also as complex numbers, because you know that complex numbers give you the complex plane for representation, which is the same as the xy plane. Okay, so whatever you can write in terms of ij components, you can write the same thing as real imaginary components of a complex number. And whatever operations you could do with vector algebra in 2D, okay, the same things you can do for complex numbers. So classically, people found complex numbers more suited. Temperamentally, I am more friendly with vector notations with geometric vectors, but don't mind it doing with complex numbers. Now, the temperamental factor of doing it better or doing it more happily with geometric vectors is perhaps basically in my early research career, in which I was operating with spatial mechanisms where you cannot use complex numbers as you can do in linear mechanisms. And from the vector notation, as easily as I wanted, I could go into matrix algebra, and vector algebra to matrix algebra conversions are quite straightforward. But then, so far as planar mechanisms are concerned, doing it through complex numbers, many people might find it temperamentally easier, which is fine. I don't mind doing it. And you can, but why I'm pointing out these things is that whatever you are doing with complex numbers, but quite often calling them as vectors, you should keep in mind that the two are completely equivalent. 2D vectors and complex numbers are completely equivalent, and the whole thing you can do with ordinary 2D vectors as you do in ordinary geometric processing. Okay. So express link configurations as vectors and identify necessary variables to express them. Okay. So these variables are scalars. Then identify different independent kinematic loops and establish a vector equation or complex equation for every loop. That is, starting from one point on the loop, if you can go around the loop and come back to that point, then the sum total must be 0. The same thing equivalently, you can say that in the loop, if I can go from point P to point T through one pathway and through another pathway, then whatever is the vector, finally sum of vectors giving vector pt through this loop, through this half of the loop and through that half of the loop must be the same. Either you say like that or you say that come back and get 0. It's the same thing. Okay. So for each loop you write one such equation, which is a vector equation or equivalently a complex equation with complex quantities. Then separate the orthogonal components, IJ component or real imaginary component, whatever way you are doing. And so you have got the scalar components of the loop closure equations. Now simply solve the system of these scalar equations. Mind you, they are going to be nonlinear equations, so it is not going to be cakewalk. For the variables, for the given values of input variables. Now, after you give the input variables, the number of equations should match the number of unknowns. And in that case, whether the equations are linear or nonlinear, you expect to have a determinate system. You will have a determinate system if your identification of the independent loops has been correct. Okay. Now, this is the process. And now the number of input variables will be the degree of freedom. Keep in mind. Now, this is a process, and you understand the process only through examples, the way it was in the case of graphical methods. So let us see first the simple example, 4-bar mechanism. Yes, example of the 4-hour linkage. So 4-hour linkage has a single loop starting from O2, going to A, B, O4 and back to O2. That's it. So single loop, and we identify the variables on the way. This is a vector for which you will need this variable. So keep theta2 as a variable, which is a input variable, very important input variable, the value of which you will know. If it is input to output problem. It could be the other way. Then there is an intermediate variable theta 3 that will be useful to represent the vector AB. Then for link 4 you will have this theta 4, okay, and this is anyway the frame, so that is also a vector or a complex number you can say. And if you identify the x and y axes like this, or real and imaginary direction axes like this, then this complex number is going to be completely real. That is, its imaginary component will be 0, which is fine. Even if it were not so, it would not matter much. You would not mind. So now write the loop closure equation. There is a single loop, so only one vector equation. L1, this vector, plus L4. Now you say minus L3. Because the vector L3 you will represent from this end to that end. You could have done everything in one orientation, and in that case you would write plus 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 plus, hardly matters, okay, and then again minus vector L2, because L2 also you are expressing from this end, not from A end. So L1 plus L4 minus L3 minus L2 equal to 0. So this vector O2 O4 is L1, O4B is L4, O2A is L2, that is why AO2 is minus L2. Similarly, this one. Okay. So this is the vector equation or complex equation if you like. And then this vector in complex number notation is written like this. So this is scalar. I mean, this is not scalar, of course, vector. This is real, completely real. That is completely in horizontal direction. Okay. This is L4 times cos theta 4 plus I sin theta 4. So together you can write like this. Similarly, this and this. And now open up the real and imaginary components. So from here you will get L1 plus L4 cos theta 4 minus L3 cos theta 3 minus L2 cos theta 2. That is 0. And similarly, the imaginary component. Okay. So these are the two equations. And suppose theta 2 is given. There are three variables here: theta 2, theta 3, theta 4. Okay. Variables in the sense that they vary as the mechanism operates, not necessarily unknown. Now, one of them will be known because it is a single degree of freedom mechanism. So one variable has to be known, then only you can determine the others. So suppose the input variable theta 2 is known, okay, and you want to solve for theta 3, theta 4. More importantly, you would be interested in solving for theta 4 because that is typically the output variable. Okay. So theta 3 you try to eliminate to first crack the problem. So to eliminate theta 3, the simplest thing possible is to take L3 cos theta 3 on the other side, L3 sin theta 3 on the other side, and then have these two. And now elimination of theta 3 is obvious. You square this, and add together. So with L3 square, you will get cos square theta 3 plus sin square theta 3, which is 1. That means lock, stock and barrel theta 3 goes out of picture. Okay. So L3 square turns out to be equal to this square plus this square, and the terms from there also are going to be quite friendly. A plus B plus C whole square, or A plus B minus C whole square if you like, will give you L1 square from here, L4 square cos square theta 4, and from the next one appropriately you will get L4 square sin square theta 4. So together L4 square. Similarly, this square together will give you L2 square plus twice L1 L4 cos theta 4 minus twice L1 L2 cos theta 2 minus twice L2 L4 cos theta 2 cos theta 4 minus twice L2 L4 sine theta 3 2 sine theta 4. So all these things you will get here. The details of the term you also can work out the way I just verbally said. Okay. The point to note is that this equation will be linear in cos theta 4 and sin theta 4. We don't mind theta 2 appearing in any way because theta 2 is known. Okay. So in cos theta 4 and sin theta 4, it will be linear. So finally, you will be able to organize the equation in this form. Something into cos theta 4 plus something into sin theta 4 equal to some number. That is this minus this minus this minus this. Okay. So you get it like this. Now you see only one unknown is there, theta 4, and only one equation. So you can solve it. How to solve it? I mean, you can solve it in any way you like. But then there are two straightforward ways of solving equivalent to each other in terms of, you know, complications and issues. One way of solving is cos sin substitution, in which you say cos theta 4 and sin theta 4 I try to replace with something. So you say A is something times cos phi and B is that same something times sin phi. Then what is that something? That something is square root of a square plus b square. So that means then you will have that square root of a square plus b square into cos theta 4 cos phi plus sin theta 4 sin phi. That is cos theta 4 minus phi. Okay. And so that will be, and then you divide by root over a square plus b square here, and that will be cosine of theta 4 minus phi. So theta 4 will be, of course, you take cos inverse, plus minus both are fine. Okay. So cos inverse will typically, according to inverse function definition, it will give you the positive term because cos inverse as a function gives you values from 0 to pi and not negative numbers. So minus you have to include because that also could be the correct result. And then you say, so theta 4 minus phi is this. So bring phi on this side and that's it. And what is phi? You say something into cos phi was this, that same something into sin phi was this. So if you divide, something something goes out, then you get sin phi by cos phi is b by a. So that is this. Okay. So that is how you get this phi. This is one way of solving. Other than cos sin substitution, equivalently, you can do a tan half angle substitution. Call tan theta 4 by 2 as u and then say that cos theta 4 is then 1 minus tan square theta by 2 by 1 plus tan square theta by 2. And sin theta 4 is twice tan theta by 2 by 1 plus tan square theta by 2. So if you substitute this in place of cos theta 4 and sin theta 4, and then in the denominator in both terms you have got 1 plus u square. So throughout you multiply with that, and that is fine. That will never be 0 because 1 plus u square cannot be less than 1. Okay. So then finally, as you organize all the terms together, you will basically get a quadratic in u. Okay. And you can solve it and get two solutions. From here also you were getting two solutions for theta 4. And from here you will get two solutions for u. Okay. And for each of the solution of u, you get only one solution for theta 4. Okay. Because you will get this theta 4 in plus minus 90-degree range, because later, I mean theta 4 by 2 you will get in plus minus 90-degree range, and then you would anyway double to get theta 4. So only one value of theta 4 for every value of u. So two values of theta 4 you would get. Both are correct. Okay. So you see, in this case, this is one value of theta 4, and there can be another value because there can be another position of B, which is the mirror image across AO4 somewhere here. Okay. So for that, this huge angle or this negative obtuse angle, that also will be valid. Okay. Correspondingly, theta 3 will be different. In this case, theta 3 is this. In that case, theta 3 would be something like this. Okay. So you would get two solutions for theta 4, and make note that if you want the theta 3 value also, then for each solution of theta 4, you should get a single solution of theta for theta 3. And to get that value of theta 3, if you use this, cosine will suggest two values. If you use this, sine will also suggest two values. Now, out of these two values from this equation and out of these two values from this equation, only one of the values will be common. The wrong one here will not match with this fellow's value, and the wrong one of this one will not match with that. So only one will be correct. So and that is one care one should exercise. Otherwise, suddenly you would find four set of values. Okay. So no. Two solutions for theta 4, both of them are valid. Whichever you first determine out of theta 3 and theta 4, by policy from this stage onwards, we have eliminated theta 3, got theta 4 first. So both solutions for theta 4 are right. If we had eliminated rather theta 4 and got theta 3, then both solutions of theta 3 would be right. So whichever you first find through the elimination of the other, both values of that would be fine. And then you replace the determined value to get the eliminated variable, that is the variable which you eliminated earlier, and here each of the equation is only partial information. So one correct value it will give, not the other. Okay. So whichever you use, suppose you use this one, get the theta 3 value, and then just substitute here, and if it satisfies, then that is the correct one. Otherwise, the other one will be correct. You should check that also, just in case you made any calculation mistake, then that also would turn out to be invalid. Okay. So then you would know that you have made a mistake. Okay. So finally, total two solutions of the problem you would get. Okay. So this is quite straightforward. And now, so analytical method has a lot of advantages, and it is very powerful, and you can use it again and again as many times as you want with this kind of ease, with no extra effort, no extra labor. So now that you have got a machine gun, you would come across many problems that you can solve by shooting. Okay. So for example, you can say that, okay, I'm going to solve it with given theta 2, but then I will give theta 2 value once at 0 degree, then 1 degree, then 2 degree, then 3 degree, 4 degree, 5 degree, and so on till 360 degree. Okay. After which it would anyway repeat. And for each of them, I will get the values of theta 3 and theta 4. And then against theta 2, I can plot. So through those plots, you can study how the theta 3 and theta 4 plots versus theta 2 come. That is how the motion, entire motion of the mechanism through the cycle is taking place, how the mechanism evolves its configurations, okay, over a cycle. You can study that. Okay. And through that, you can also examine how the nature of the plots differ from double crank to triple crank to double rocker, crank rocker, and Grashofian, non-Grashofian, whatever, all those things you can study. And this is an interesting study. It reveals a lot of interesting things, which otherwise looking at the expressions, uh, you would not appreciate, you would not understand. Okay. Then for a crank rocker, the rocker does not go through full circle, so it rocks. Okay, it goes from one extreme to the other, and then for the rest of the cycle it comes back. Then in the next cycle goes and comes back, and so on. So the angle through which it goes and comes back is called the swing angle. And most of the time, except for a very singular case for which you can find out the condition, the one part is quicker compared to the other. Okay, if the input crank is rotated at a uniform speed. So if the input crank is rotating with a uniform speed, then something like for 200 degrees of crank rotation, rocker is going from one extreme to the other, and for the remaining 160 degrees, it is coming back. That means for the forward motion of the for the forward swing of the rocker, it would take more time if the crank is rotating at a uniform speed. So for the forward swing, it would take the rocker would take more time from going to from one extreme to the other, and for return it would take less time. And that has an advantage that has been advantageously used because many industrial operations are really loaded only through one of its directions. So when you are cutting something with the help of cutting tool, then you cut like this, and then you have to bring back your cutting tool to make another cut, then bring back and make another cut. While you are making the cut, you need to go slowly because you don't want to give it a shock. At that time, quite a bit of load is there. While coming back, you typically don't cut both ways, like this, like this, like this, like this. You don't cut. It's not a hacksaw. Okay. So cutting tool, you would have noticed that most of the cutting tools have one way. So they remove the chips one way. Okay. So for the return journey, it doesn't make very good sense to come slowly. Okay. So for example, against your enemies, you are pushing through the territory and front line and going into the place, and then after coming back, you have to again start another operation. So while coming back also, coming back that slowly, as slowly you advanced, doesn't make any sense. So this quick return kind of effect you can utilize in such operations, where in one swing you really work, and in the other swing you basically need to get back to the original position to do it again. So in such situations you use quick return mechanisms, and they typically have crank rockers with the appropriate value of the quick return ratio, that is ratio of the forward crank angle and reverse crank angle, that is crank angle for the forward motion of the rocker divided by the time required for the reverse motion, reverse swing of the rocker. So these things you can analyze because you have got the equations with you and in hand, and everything you can solve out clearly. This you could have done from graphical methods also. Okay, but now you can develop formulas which will be useful for you to design when you are trying to design a mechanism for such a purpose. Okay. Double crank mechanisms have another purpose, and that is for transmitting continuous motion, cyclic motion continuously. Okay. So they will maintain the average speed of this and that, and of course during the motion, if you drive the crank during a cycle, if you drive the crank uniformly, in the output, which is also crank in that case, okay, the follower, it would be a variable speed over a cycle. Okay. Now another thing, you can make a formulation for the so-called transmission angle. Suppose this is the output link of a mechanism, and the motion of this link was the purpose of this mechanism. So this has to take some load. So when this mechanism is used in a machine where the business is to transmit motion as well as force, then how is the force of the actuator finally being transmitted to this output link? Through this link, which is connecting it to the rest of the mechanism. And if mostly this link would be transmitting a force along this direction, and along this direction a force that has been given to this, out of that the component along this link, there is a cos mu component, would be typically fighting the constraint, right? It is a sin mu component which would produce any real action, real work against any, stopping force. So it is the sin mu component which is going to be useful. So the force developed through the mechanism from the actuator is going to be well transmitted if this mu is close to 90 degree. Okay. So you formulate what is the transmission angle in terms of the kinematic data of the mechanism and one variable, because every other variable can be expressed in terms of that variable and the kinematic data. And then you say that typically I would like the transmission angle to be close to 90 degree. You cannot say 90 degree all the time because the mechanism over the cycle, executes relative motion. So all the time this angle cannot be at a constant value. But through the cyclic study, through the study of the entire cycle, for the entire cycle you can find out mu, and you can actually work out the mu min, that is the minimum value of this mu, minimum value of the transmission angle over the entire cycle, and then say that minimum value should not fall too low. For example, it should not fall below 30 degree, because at 30 degree, you know that only half the force will be transmitted, because sine 30 is half, sine 30 degree is half. Okay. So if even half the force cannot be transmitted, then what is the idea? What is the fun? So you say that transmission angle should be at least 30 degree, preferably better than that. Okay. So you can make that formulation and check very easily. You can work out formulas for that. Then you can talk of mechanisms for special purposes, say for generating a straight line through full cycle or through part of the cycle, or one point of the mechanism executing whatever motion that we will give, a 2D motion in XY plane. Another point manages to execute a copy of that mechanism, perhaps a scaled and rotated copy. Okay, but then it would get a true replica of the original point which we are moving from our own commands. Okay, so that is a copying mechanism, regiograph. So that has certain applications. So such special purpose mechanisms you can develop through the use of these analytical tools. Of course, that design part of it is to an extent in the realm of synthesis. Right now we are doing analysis, but analysis is typically useful in the business of synthesis. So quite a few these things have been nicely elaborated in the textbook, and I leave it for you to study these extensions in the textbook. Right now, we will do something else. Last time we saw, I mean, just a little while back, we saw the example of a 4-bar mechanism solved through the analytical methods, which is something very simple. Now we want something complicated. So we get something complicated, just a little complicated. And for that, we take an example where the graphical method fails. Okay, so this is the mechanism. It's a 6-bar mechanism. Okay, so this is actually a Stephenson chain. This is one ternary, and the frame is the other ternary, and the two ternaries are not directly connected. Here they are linked through one binary, here through another binary, here through two binaries. Okay, so link 2, link 3, link 4 is the ternary link, then link 5, and then here link 6. Okay, and link 1 is the frame, and input is link 2. And now you see it is not dyadic. Okay, so of course the kinematic data will be L1, which is O2, O5. Oh, this should be O2, O5, not O1. There is no O1. O2, O5. That is this L1. Okay, and this point is PQ. Okay, XY coordinates I have shown in this frame. Okay, so O1, O2, O5, O2, O5, that is L1, and PQ. These three are the frame data, and then the link lengths L2, L3, L5, L6, 4 binaries. And for this ternary, there are 3 important lengths. I am representing them as small b, small c, small d, because the vertices of this ternary link are B, C, D. Connection points are B, C, D. So using the standard notation, that if the triangle is triangle BCD with vertices shown by capital letters, the opposite sides are shown by small letters. So that is what we are doing here. I think the C and D, either the capital one or the small one, you have to exchange. Okay, so you should actually exchange the capital C and D, not the small c and D, because the small c and D I have used here. Okay, so small c and D you retain. This capital C has to go here. This capital D has to come here. Okay, so this is a mistake. Now here again you see that what I have done here is graphical method. Making the change is difficult. If I had done it through a computerized method, then change would be very easy. Anyway, so these BCD also kinematic data. Either you give BCD or you give BC phi. Okay, so they are equivalent. So two sides and the included angle you could have given. Otherwise, you can always find phi is this. Fine. Now the variables are this theta 2, this theta 3, say this theta 4, this theta 5, and this theta 6. So corresponding to each movable link, you have got one variable. Now you identify loops. There are actually 3 loops, one like this, another like this, starting from frame, ending at frame. There would be a third which would be like this, but that would not be independent of the other 2. By addition or subtraction of the other 2, you would get this. So only independent 2 loops. So write the loop closure equations. So for this pentagonal link, you get vector L1 plus vector L5, that is here, plus vector C, which is this, minus vector L3, which is this, minus vector L2, which is this. And then from this loop, I'm starting from here. Okay, so this is the same vector L5 which I used in the earlier one. Now this one will be vector B, that is this. Here I am using theta 4. In the other one you see it was theta 4 plus phi, because for vector C I needed this complete angle. Okay, then plus this vector L6 minus this much and this much. Okay, so this much is IQ, so minus IQ, and this much is P minus L1, so that is this. Okay. So these are the two loop closure equations, vector loop closure equations. And you know why graphical method would fail? Because this is not dyadic. This is known. This is anyway fixed point. And if you try to go like this, it's not a dyad that you have to assemble. It's a triad that you have to assemble. And that you can't do. Okay? Infinite possibilities are there. Okay. So then you try to approach this way. This way you don't know anything. So 1, 2, 3. Again, a triad you have to assemble. You can't do it. If you try to explore through this link, this loop, to begin with, there were 4 links in between from this fixed point to this fixed point. One you have located because input is given. So then also 3 remain. So in whatever 3 loops you have got, independent or dependent, out of that, whichever you pick, you find a triad to assemble, and you cannot start the process. Rather than this, if this were the input, then it would be easy. Okay, you would fix this, or this. If this is the input, then also it is easy. Out of 5 or 6, whichever is the input, it would be fine. There would be this loop where after prescribing the input, only a dyad would remain. Okay, and that you could assemble. And the moment you assemble that dyad, that would fix this link entirely, in particular this point, and that would leave the rest of it as a dyad. But this is not the input. So this is a complex mechanism. But in the context of velocity and acceleration analysis, later we will see that this particular one is actually complexity of low order. And in the case of velocity and acceleration analysis, this could be easily handled with very little modification to the original plan. For velocity, certainly. For acceleration, a little extra. But position analysis, you cannot do that because position equations are mostly nonlinear equations among the input coordinates and output coordinates, input variables and output variables. Okay, so that is why graphical method fails. But analytical method produces 2 loop closure equations as expected, and then you resolve these 2 loop closure equations into 4 scalar equations, and then there are 4 unknowns, because as you put the theta 2 value, then theta 4, theta 3, theta 5, theta 6, 4 unknowns remain, and you can solve them from 4 unknowns, 4 equations. Of course, it is easier said than done, because solving 4 simultaneous equations is not child's play, but it is not that difficult. Why? I'll tell you. Because from here, just like the way you did for the case of 4-bar mechanism, you do a similar thing and eliminate theta 3 from these 2 scalar equations. And theta 3 does not appear in this. Then in a similar manner, from this lower equation, you eliminate theta 6, which does not appear in the upper equation. Okay, so out of the 2 scalar equations that you get out of it, when you eliminate theta 3, this would be one eliminant scalar equation will remain in theta 2, theta 4 and theta 5. From here also, after you eliminate theta 6, similarly, you would get one eliminant scalar equation, among theta 4 and theta 5. Okay, theta 2 is not there in this, which is not a great help because anyway theta 2 was known. Whatever it is, between this equation and this equation, which is now not as simple as the original one, it has become a little difficult. But anyway, between the two, you can now eliminate one of the unknowns. So suppose you eliminate theta 4, but this you can eliminate one unknown that I am telling is a big can, and I am putting this as a little challenge for you to do that. Okay, so out of the pair of scalar equations that you get from this, eliminate theta 3. Out of this pair, eliminate theta 6. Then out of the two eliminant equations, one from here and one from here, eliminate theta 4 and get one equation in theta 5 or an equivalent variable, okay, say u5, which is tan theta 5 by 2 or some such thing. And this I am putting up as a little challenge for you people. It's not a very huge problem, you can do it. Okay, so and there is no formal official credit associated with it, but I encourage you to try it, give it a good try, and if you can do a good crack at it, then put up the solution in the forum before I try to upload the next lecture. Okay, if I get some of your um, responses to this in the forum before I record the next lecture, then I would try to incorporate those points also before the other things that I do in the next lecture. Okay, this is a very interesting exercise, and make note that this is not so easy. So if you don't eliminate, then what happens? Then you have the task of solving for two unknowns from two simultaneous nonlinear equations. That is also difficult. That's a numerical challenge. You can have Newton's method for multivariate equation solving, but it's not cakewalk. It requires some effort and it has numerical issues also. Okay. So at this point we are stopping this lecture, and in the next lecture we will continue from this point, hopefully taking in the stream something that gets triggered through your responses in the forum to this challenge. Okay, so see you again in this analytical solution in the next lecture.